Welcome to Justice Watch weekly news roundup of corruption, coming to you from your fascist state. We start this week with a picture which was published last week of a football fan being punched in the face by a police officer. This week we found out that the police are denying that this happened. They are saying that the fan in the picture being punched by a police officer is not being punched by a police officer. This is where the corruption starts in the police force. When this police officer knows that he can get away with punching someone in the face, and he knows he can cross that line, he will keep crossing and crossing that line because he knows he can get away with it. And eventually, down the line, it will end up in murder. Because these police officers kill. We've seen many cases of this. Many members of the public end up dead whilst being in their custody. You can clearly see the football fan has both his arms restrained. And this police officer takes a cheap shot because they're cowards. They're little boys and little girls in all their little police drag uniform on. These little boys and little girls wouldn't dare confront members of the public without their little police badge and their little police drag. They attack people in the most vulnerable situations. Probably the most vulnerable situations they've ever been in their lives. They are supposed to take care of the public. When we are in their custody, it's their responsibility to take care of us. We are no longer able to be responsible because they are in charge. And this is how they abuse the situation. They are cowards, little boys and little girls. Christopher Ada was killed in 1998 as he was left for dead on the custody suite floor in a police station. Whilst he was taking his last breaths, the police officers stood around mocking him, making monkey noises as he was struggling to breathe and eventually died. After the police force gave the family the wrong body to bury, which means they had to dig up someone else's grave and then rebury Christopher Ada. Despite that, the police force then put the family under surveillance. We found out this week that the sister to Christopher was put under surveillance by the police force. She hasn't committed any crimes. There's no reason for her to be under surveillance. Maybe they put her under surveillance to gain information for a possible up-and-coming court case involving those police officers. It kind of reminds you of Stephen Lawrence. He was also killed. And then soon after, their family was put under surveillance. You had police officers, undercover police officers living opposite their gardens. For what? So they can gain information to protect the police and to protect those police officers.
The people, and somebody punches him and he falls, bangs his head, on the cobbled ground. The nightclub staff place him in the recovery position until an ambulance is called. Then he's taken to the Hull Royal Infirmary, and the police go and see him as a complainant in an assault, and end up dragging him round the hospital, through chairs, crashing through chairs and whatsoever, and drag him to the toilet. They don't even allow him to go to the toilet himself. I mean, he's not been charged with anything. And then they decide to arrest him to prevent a breach of the peace, and they drag him out backwards with his feet trailing. The police had said that Christopher had walked out in front of them forward, and the hospital staff said they were dragged out backwards. Once handcuffed, he steps into the back of a van. Within what was supposed to be a 5-minute journey to the police station, Christopher comes out fully unconscious, with his trousers and box shorts down to his knees, and they drag him into the custody suite, place him on the floor on his front, and he's gasping for his life for 11 minutes. Police have stood there speaking about charging him with more severe charges because they can't have him there to prevent a breach of the peace. And Christopher dies on the custody suite floor.
So he was murdered by the police?
He was murdered by the police, yeah. I believe the police took him away, CS gassed him and beat him until he was unconscious, and then tried to pretend that they didn't know what had happened. I thought, after seeing the CCTV footage 2 years later, that we were going to get justice. I really believed in justice in this country. Until we had an unlawful killing verdict, which 9 ordinary men and women looked at the evidence, saw the video, and came to the conclusion that Christopher was unlawfully killed by the police. We then decided to have a funeral for him in 2000, where the army came to pay the last respect with him being a paratrooper. People from Hull came, other campaigns that had lost people in police custody had come, all my family, and I really thought that we'd laid him to rest and given him the best funeral that he could have.
But it wasn't him, was it?
No. Just in 2011 I found out it was a 77-year-old woman.
So
The story reminds me of Mazi Mohammed, who ended up dead after being confronted by police and security staff at Liverpool 1 in 2016 in July. We've not had any updates from the IPCC or any updates from the police since they said in January, I think it was, that the investigation was going to be delayed. Whenever a member of the public is killed or ended up dead in their custody, it's always a conspiracy. It's always a mysterious death. It's always unknown. It takes years and years for any court case to ever happen. How come it's always mysterious? How come it always ends up in a big conspiracy? The next story is about a police officer who thinks it's acceptable to put a 13-year-old child into a headlock and then put her under arrest after messing around with another schoolgirl outside of the school. The next story is about a school who decides to set up CCTV cameras in the toilets. How is this not a criminal offence? How is filming children going to the toilet not a criminal offence? How is that not paedophilia? How is this acceptable? How is filming children going to the toilet acceptable? Who's filming this? Who set up those cameras? What happened to those videos? It's disgusting. Who is looking after our children? Because it's not the school. Clearly it's not the police. With the amount of paedophiles in the police force that we constantly hear about. And we know for sure it's not social services. We know what they do to children. We know why they kidnap and take children. We know what they do. So who is looking after our children? This is just like Nazi Germany. This is what happened. Parents ignorantly, naively gave away their children to the state. Hitler was in power for many years. He didn't just turn up and boom, you have a fascist state. He was elected. It was a democracy. This is how it starts. It's steptoeing into total fascism. We found out this week, like last week, another paedophile group caught another paedophile and put him under citizen's arrest, waited for the police to turn up, provided all the evidence needed for the police to make an arrest and charge this paedophile. But instead, the police didn't. Our children have never been in such danger before. They've never been so vulnerable. Parents and families need to start looking after their children and not relying on the state, whether it's social services, the police, the school, whatever part of this fascist state. Only they can look after their children. Only a mother and a father can keep their child safe. This is total fascism, which we're walking into. I mean, we're pretty much already there, as you can see. At some point, we are going to have to try and start pushing back. Hopefully, at some point, before it's too late, before they start building camps.
This is Mommy Pig. Mommy Pig? And this is Daddy Pig. Peppa Pig.